Hello, everyone. Welcome to this week's DevOps Chat. I'm really delighted to have Steve Thayer with us. He is the CTO and co-founder of DevOps Guys. Steve, thank you so much for joining us.
A pleasure to be here.
We're going to talk about the role that DevOps plays in digital transformation. But perhaps before we get started on that topic, you could tell us a little bit about your background, what you've worked on in the past, and also what you're doing now and what your interests are.
Great, sure. So my name's Steve Thayer. I'm the CTO and co-founder of DevOps Guys. We're a Welsh, Cardiff-based consultancy focusing on DevOps. We tend to sort of break the world up into DevOps education, understanding the tools and the technology, DevOps automation, so helping organizations, build these DevOps pipelines, and then sort of DevOps transformation, which is really all of the cultural aspects that come along with DevOps. And that's probably the thing that I'm most interested about is this: how do we actually make IT better for everyone and make it a fulfilling profession in a way I don't think it's been for a lot of people for a long time. My background is infrastructure and operations, so I was what I'd call an IT pro as opposed to a developer. I've been doing this for 25 years. I've been the operations manager running high volume websites like totaljobs.com or cwjobs.co.uk. So yeah, I've pretty much done every IT pro job there is, from pulling cables in a data center to managing networks to managing large server farms. So that's my background.
I mean, it'd be really interesting then to get some of your views, because I think many of the people we've spoken to in the past have come more from the development background, so it's interesting to have you from that perspective as well. But also what you've said there about the cultural aspects. I mean, I think in a recent white paper that I was involved with putting together, we reckoned actually only about 30% of transforming to DevOps was about the technology and the tools, and in terms of the effort of the transformation, a massive part of it, there's 70%, is all around about culture, how people work, what processes you have in place. So again, very, very interested to hear your views on that. I think we could obviously tackle it two ways. We could start by talking about DevOps and then looking at how that enables digital transformation. But let's go for it the other way, and perhaps you could start by explaining your view of digital transformation and what that really means.
Mm-hmm. I think across virtually every industry sector now, organizations are reliant on IT. They're reliant on software products either to run and manage their business, if you're in manufacturing, if you're a car plant, or if making physical goods. If you're a retailer, your logistics and supply chain, look at the amazing things that Amazon does now with, Prime Now delivery, tracking your driver as it comes to your door, 1 hour, 2 hour window. That's so reliant on IT. Every single, industry is now reliant on IT. What we're really starting to see now is that the digital channels are starting to predominate. I think some of the stats coming out of the retailers in the UK over Black Friday, I think it's well over 40% of every purchase touched a mobile channel at some point. These are insane numbers, and organisations are really struggling to cope with this digital disruption and as part of this digital transformation. There's always the poster child. So there's the Uber, it's the world's biggest taxi company, but doesn't own a taxi. Airbnb is the world's biggest accommodation provider, but doesn't own a hotel. So these companies have come from nowhere in the space of, in some cases, the space of 5 years, reaching $1 billion plus valuation to dominate a market sector. And then you've got the incumbents sitting there going, I don't know what to do. And what they need to do is to develop a digital culture. They've got to be out there talking to their customers in the channels and the social media channels their customers use. They've got to simplify all their purchasing. They've got to simplify their supply chains. That's the challenge that digital transformation or digital disruption presents, and digital transformation is the response to.
Yeah. So it's very, and I remember, I think it was a few years ago, John Lewis said their entire growth one year came from an increase in online sales. I mean, sometimes they were fulfilled in store, but as you say, it's harder and harder to be competitive, I suppose, for many businesses unless they have a strong technology capability. And I can't remember. I should be able to remember. There's the quote, isn't there, of "software is eating the world."
Yeah, Mark Andreessen. Yeah,
someone else saying now every company is a software company. But
Jeff Immelt from GE said that.
So it's really, I suppose that's the shift, isn't it? Software used to be something that kind of helped with your payroll or helped with your stock control in the background, but no one really succeeded or failed. No businesses succeeded or failed dependent on how good their HR payroll system was. It was just it was something you needed, but it wasn't differentiating you. Okay, so that's the challenge of digital transformation. And I suppose then, can we come on to what role DevOps plays in a company's digital transformation?
So the way we see it is that DevOps is the engine room of that digital transformation. Some people are talking about this as the fourth industrial revolution. DevOps is a set of patterns and practices that is correlated with high performance IT. And you need high performance IT, you need high performance software development, you need high performance digital product development to widen this thing out from everything from how you get, from the phrase that people use is from concept to cash. That's what the Popendieks, Tom and Mary Popendiek coined that phrase in one of their books. And really at its core, DevOps is trying to come up with this new operating model, this new operating system for your IT department, because this siloed way of working doesn't work anymore. The very waterfall, linear, print to ITIL siloed way of delivering these products and services doesn't work, because marketing's got to be involved at the time. The salespeople have got to be involved. The product owner has got to manage this whole thing together. It's got to be more dynamic. It's got to be faster. And to be honest, and the customer's going to be involved. If you look at the best apps that are in the App Store, what you see, the 5-star apps is normally always have a comment, oh, I raised an issue with the developer, they responded to me the same day, they sent out a new fix. That's what helped drives the tailoring that product, what they call product market fit. So it really just the customer. I mean, if you look at Tesla, the coverage they got for where a customer tweeted Elon Musk about something that he didn't like about the charging platforms. Elon Musk said that was a great idea. 6 days later, they'd remotely updated all of the charging points with this new feature and software that the customer wanted. I mean, think the feedback cycle from the customer is so key.
Yeah. And so, I mean, there's a couple of things you mentioned there. One thing I'd be interested to hear you expand on is, so you mentioned IT performance and increasing IT performance. So what do you think characterizes high levels of IT performance in an organization?
I think, okay, so there's the technical answer and there's the business answer. The business answer is, are you continuously delivering value to the business? Does business look at you and say, wow, those guys in IT are helping me bring my products to market. They're getting out of my way, or they're enabling all the things I want to do, and they're a partner in the success of the business? Or are they a drain on the resource? If I could get rid of them, I'd do. And increasingly with cloud and SaaS products, what you see is the guy with the marketing department with the credit card. He goes and hires a digital agency, creates a subscription on Azure or AWS, and then suddenly you've got all this shadow IT over there. So that's the business answer. The Puppet State of DevOps report, which I urge everybody to read every year, covers a number of key metrics, change failure rate, mean time to repair. So how often do you break things when you deploy? How quickly can you fix it? Frequency of deployment, how many times can you think? And there's a fourth key metric that I can't remember, but they're the sort of the technical metrics, these technical capabilities. I've got to be able to change it 100% reliably I've got to be able to fix it really quickly if something goes wrong. I've got to be able to release quickly.
And yeah, and so it's great to hear you sort of talk about value, and particularly I think the business seeing IT as generating value rather than being a cost, because that also
Absolutely.
affects how you manage. If it's just a cost, then you obviously look to lower it. Whereas if it's generating value, it can change both how you perceive it and how you manage it. The other thing you touched on was collaboration with the business, with customers, and I mentioned this at Agile Knots last week, that I think sometimes a challenge with the term DevOps is its background is, of course, closer collaboration between developers and operations people.
Yeah, absolutely.
But I think it's much, if you do DevOps well, it's actually much wider collaboration than just devs and ops guys. It's everyone across. It's, as you said, sales, it's marketing, it's business people, it's the end user, it's customers. Is that something you subscribe to, and have you seen that in practice?
Yeah, I mean, just DevOps is a great place to start, and yep. don't forget our friends in QA. They're the linchpin. Yeah. They're the fulcrum that a lot of this operates on, and our friends in IT security are very rapidly jumping on the bandwagon. What I would say is that there's no point in having this fantastic machinery that can deliver all of this change into production quickly and reliably and scalably, and fantastic cost control by using cloud. If the requirements that come in the front end is a 100-page Word document written in 8-point text that has effectively 30 vague requirements per page.
Yeah.
That's never going to give you this end-to-end value chain that you want.
Mm-hmm,
Therefore, you've got to have a conversation with the product owner. You've got to have a conversation with the business. Say, hey, if this to work, we need you to break this down into smaller chunks for us. We need you to write it in the form of user stories, and we're going to teach you. Given then when and the syntax for Cucumber and story syntax, as a I want so that type story syntax, we're gonna teach you those things, and it's going to become a collaboration, and then eventually that then leads to, well, why don't I start to have multidisciplinary product focused teams who own a product? We don't do projects anymore. We do products, and the minute you become product aligned, you start to say, well, why can't we have a couple of marketing people who are aligned to my product and a couple of sales people who are aligned to my product? If it's a go-to-market product, just to be clear, your product that you manage might be a component level product or as part of the value chain. It doesn't necessarily have to be a go-to-market product. And
so, I mean, there's several points you covered there. I guess you're familiar with the work of Don Reynoldson and the principles of
product development flow.
Exactly. And
if you're going to read any book, read that book. But like a chapter at a time, because it's so dense.
It's very dense.
I've still never made the whole way through it myself. I've got to admit.
But one thing I love in that book, and it's completely what you've said there, is he talks about where you have large batch transfers, and it actually shows that if you're going to have a large batch transfer, it's better to have it at the end of the process than at the start. And I think sometimes there's this emphasis with DevOps and continuous integration and continuous deployment to make it continuous at the end. But actually, as you say, if the thing you start with is a great big requirements document that's going to take 2 years to deliver, you're not really getting the value of all that continuous stuff. Continuous requirements is as important or more important than continuous delivery, and I imagine something that's easy to neglect. And the other things you've touched on there, some of the behavior-driven development, Cucumber. We talked to, I don't know if you know Liz Key about that. She was one of our previous guests. But again, that different language, that different way of bringing it, and she said it was all about enabling conversations, and using examples to specify rather than as you say, trying to have the system shall.
Yeah, I mean so there's a number of things there. I mean, first of all, Reynoldson should be, principles of product development flow is mandatory reading for anybody that wants to get into DevOps. I mean, it is just, obviously right up there with, the Phoenix Project and the DevOps Handbook. the analysis that he does about how small batch sizes, what eventually people talk about one piece flow through the system, is absolutely key. And the other key point that Ryan Ernstson makes is queue size and cycle time goes up at about 70% utilization, goes up asymptotically. As work arrives, if you're already 70% busy, it's going to, on average, it's going to wait, 1, 2, 3 times your average cycle time, and literally goes up asymptotically from there. And that's a huge challenge for business to understand is that, I can't work all my devs at 95% utilization. If you want to have this flexibility to drop in new requirements or change things, as part, you should be doing that in your backlog grooming if you're using a Scrum type model, but even in a Kanban model where it's much more pull based, to really get the benefits of this cycle time, you've got to have flexibility and lower utilization, and that's absolutely key. I think in the example Liz's example, we go right back to the principles of Agile. A user story is the promise of a conversation. It's this concept that user stories doesn't necessarily have everything you need. That's what the product owner is there for. Maybe, so I might need to go and have a conversation with somebody about this. I'm going to have to get together with my devs and my testers and now with my ops person, because my ops person is going to say, stop putting all of this data hard-coded into an INI file. That doesn't work. I can't deal with that. It's not scalable. It's not secure. Use something like HashiCorp Console, a key value store that enables me to pull that stuff out dynamically. So the first thing every service you does, it goes out to Console and gets the parameters that you need. That would help me in my job, and you've got to help me in my job. I think one of the other key principles of DevOps is this, never knowingly pass a defect downstream. Really, or if you do have to pass a defect downstream, and there are times when we do, we live in the real world, flag it. There is I'm handing you something that has technical debt in it. It's not perfect. I know that it's not perfect. We've knowingly accepted that it's not perfect, but we've flagged it, and I'm not throwing you in rugby terms a hospital pass to be about to get slammed by a 17 stone forward.
Now, there's two things you've touched on which I think can be really challenging culturally. So I'm interested to hear maybe your views or your tips on how you can address that. And the first thing is what you've just mentioned around utilization. I think businesses, managers are often trained, conditioned to try and achieve high utilization. In other words, to keep people busy. I suppose, firstly, does that match your experience? And secondly, what sort of things can you do to change that mentality?
The scientific theory of management, to go back to this guy, Frederick Winslow Taylor's Taylorism, scientific management, and the whole thrust of the outsourcing movement in IT over the last 20 years almost has been that you can create this very mindless robotic software factory that you're going to have a whole bunch of people, and I'm going to send off these requirements, and these requirements are going to be just perfectly handed down like tablets from Moses coming down the mountain, and magically you're going to get this thing out the end, and then you're going to have all these people working at 100% utilization in between. It just doesn't match the reality. Software development is still a complex thing. We don't really know how to do it properly yet. And anybody who thinks that all the issues and all the complexities and processes of software development and product development as a whole and running it in the cloud as a whole are solved is crazy. It's hard. It's complicated. We don't really know how to do it. But we're learning. We're iterating and we're finding better ways. I think, so that's the first point. The second point is around, what do you need? Well, if you want flexibility, we can show you mathematically, if you want flexibility, you got to have lower utilization. I mean, it's a really super simple example is think of a checkout at a supermarket. Do you know what I mean? If it takes on average 10 minutes for somebody to get their cart through, and checkout is 50% utilized. So when I randomly go to a checkout that's 50% utilized, half the time there's not going to be nobody there, and half the time I'm probably going to wait 10 minutes because that's the cycle time.
Yeah.
Okay, that's pretty well, 50%. Let's just say, so suddenly it's now 90% utilized. Okay, so 9 times out of 10 when I go there is going to be a queue, and quite possibly, depending upon the arrival rate of new work, that queue might be 5, 10, 15. Suddenly, I could be waiting an hour, you know, if it's 10 minutes to get through and there's 6 people who have already arrived in the queue. You know, it's just crazy. Mathematically, you can't have the flexibility the modern business needs in a digital world. Elon Musk example, 6 days, you know. He did not have a bunch of 100% utilized developers sat there, you know, and be able to get something in and turned around in 6 days. He must have had a flexible pool of resources.
And it's very interesting. This is perhaps a bit geeky to admit to, but I wrote a little C++ simulation to look at queuing, and of course, the two are related. So you mentioned software is complicated, so there is variability. In other words, you might think every change will take 2 days, but some will take an hour and some will take a week. And that is the limit to how much you would even want to reduce that variability.
And just on that point, before we move on, no matter how experienced a developer you are crap at estimating. You say it's going to take an hour, or you say it's going to take a day, and it takes you 5 days. And I know there's probably people listening there going, oh, I'm awesome at estimating. Well, I would challenge you to write your estimates down and track the reality of the variability of your estimates, and they're always way out.
And once you realize it's that variability, so in my simulations, what I found was you could get very high utilization and low wait times as long as there was no variability. So as long as everything takes 2 hours, then you can keep the people busy and it's fine. But as soon as there's variability, you've got to have people that will sometimes be just waiting to start on work, because otherwise you'll have huge long queues. And as you say, then the average wait time doesn't just kind of, it's not like and I can't remember the exact numbers, but it was kind of like it shot up from an average wait time of an hour, say, at 80% utilization, up to 9 months at 99%. You know, it's completely disproportionate.
It's sort of fairly linear up to about 70-ish%. This is like Reinertsen's graphs, and then it is exponential past there. I mean, it literally goes up. I think, and this is sort of coming back to Reinertsen's key message, is the smaller the unit of change we can make, the smallest batch size, the better chance that batch size is going to be less variable. Yeah. You know, so if it's a small unit change, it's just a single, it's 5 lines of code, 10 lines of code, 20 lines of code to change this one small thing. That's my commit, that's my feature branch. That gives you a better chance of starting to get to this idea of lean thinking and trying to develop this tact time, this cadence of how work is going to flow through the system. It's always going to be variable, but a large batch size is even more variable than the smallest batch size.
And I guess that's where it translates. The sort of phrase I hear in DevOps terminology a lot is smaller increments of software delivered more frequently.
Absolutely,
as you say, you're trying to get to that single piece flow idea. Yeah.
And from an operations perspective, if we turn it from my point of view of the world, is if every single commit, triggers a build, triggers package, and eventually gets a continuous delivery, continuous deployment, triggers a release. When something goes wrong, I know I know that 10 things have been deployed in the last hour. Well, it's got to be one of those 10. That's why my mean time to repair goes down. Yeah. Because at the worst case scenarios, I just back all 10 of those things out, and maybe I just flip a feature flag to back them all out. Or at least from a troubleshooting point of view, I can immediately discount 7 of them because they're not related to that system at all. That's a hell of an assumption, but maybe we'll live with that. And then I've got 3 things. Yeah. So in the same way they talk about an attack surface from an IT security point of view, my problem surface, my troubleshooting surface has been massively reduced. If you drop a 6-month release that might have, years worth of work, 20-person development team, working, for 6 months, that's 10 man years of development, and I drop that in one batch. You're telling me I've got to troubleshoot through 10 man years of software development to try and find where the problem was. That is a non-trivial problem.
And a friend of mine, Chris Bainham Hughes, the expression he uses is, rather than trying to find the needle in the haystack, just don't create the haystack.
Absolutely. Perfect analogy.
Great. I always think that's a great way of putting it. So just finally then, one other thing you briefly mentioned was the idea of moving away from projects to more of a product focus. And we had, I don't know if you know Alan Kelly, who was one of our guests last year. And again, he started the
Alan's no projects hashtag.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, he did say to us that he doesn't like to emphasize no projects too much because it doesn't necessarily win him any friends within the management part of organizations. And I suppose that highlights the challenge. So again, what do you think, for people who have a strong desire and need to say, well, no, you have to tell me now how much it's going to cost and when I'll have it before I'll sign off this £1 million budget for 2 years. How do you start to change that kind of very ingrained culture?
I think that's one of the biggest problems that both Agile and DevOps has, and I don't think anybody's cracked it really yet. I think if you really came up with the funding model that finance and the CFO can understand, but in a way that's completely aligned with Agile and DevOps principles, you'd be a multimillionaire. We're fumbling our way towards it. I think the first thing is this idea of products, not projects, and fund teams. Mm-hmm. Fund a team for a period of time. Or fund enough teams you think you're going to have to do this much software development, or fund that many teams and then kind of work out what you want to do with them, and make this commitment that software development is a core competency and software product end-to-end life cycle, including operations, is a core competency of your business. This idea that you're going to just be able to bang in a new system and then it goes away, well, no, it's not really realistic. So I think that's a core message. At the end of the day, people still have to make an ROI calculation, and people think that the most important part of the ROI calculation is just, I get a return on investment of 20%, or I will break even after X period of times. That's not actually the most important part. The most important part is what they call opportunity cost. It's the cost of doing the next best thing with that money that I've got. I've got $1 million to spend. You're trying to tell me to spend it in this. But really what I care about, what's the next best thing that I could do with the money? And the value of this project is actually only the difference between that next best thing and this is what I'm doing. And it's really hard. I mean, it is a very valid question for the organization to ask is, give me a rough idea of what this is going to cost, and let me try and do some kind of return on investment calculation, because I've got to do the best for my shareholders. I've got to do the best for the employees to make this business a success, and I've got to make the right strategic choices. And as when you start to run a small business like DevOps guys, these problems become very, very real. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. So I still think that there's a long way to go. There's the whole beyond budgeting movement to look at. So looking at beyond budgeting is probably a good place to start. But again, this is a conversation that has to happen in conjunction. This is the digital transformation thing. Digital transformation applies to the finance department, to the PMO, to everybody's got to say, actually, there are new funding models out there. I mean, I know my wife used to be a test manager at a company not unrelated to some of the companies we've been talking about, and she was forecasting out the testing resource that they would need for the next 18 months. And it looked like, well, we kind of need about two and a half contractors for the next 18 months. So can I just go out and get some really good people for 2 years, and really no, because our funding model is each project would come to, and I need a tester for 8 weeks. I need a tester for 8 weeks. And it's like, well, I'm trying to add this up and I can get somebody better at a better price if we actually, no, but I can only give you I can only fund you for 8 weeks.
Yeah.
And that's the sort of mentality that we're trying to break. What's the importance is the holistic success of the company, not the success of your project.
Yeah. And now, in some ways, it's a very nice way to close, because it brings us back full circle to this idea that, yes, the business, in order to digitally transform, will need DevOps, but actually to really reap the benefits of DevOps, it isn't just about IT or software. It's, as you say, it's executives, it's finance, it's marketing, it's sales. It is the entire business that has to transform. So it
is building a digital culture, and that's going to need digital leadership, not just at the top, but at all levels inside the organization.
Fantastic. Yeah. I mean, so that was absolutely cracking for me to have a chance to talk to you on this subject.
A pleasure. I love this stuff.
Well, it's very interesting, and it's so nice to really think about DevOps in that business sense. So thank you again for spending some time talking about this, and I'm also really looking forward to the Twitter chat itself, having you online, seeing what other people's views are on this. It's been a real pleasure. So thanks very much, Stephen.
Thanks very much. I'll have to reach out to Alan and some of the other guys and make sure they follow the chat now, because we I think the key thing is even with us, we've been trying to do thought leadership in some of this stuff. We go to our blog, this stuff now, they're 3-4 years old, that I'm just now starting to see other people talking about. But people like Alan and people like Chris Bainerd-Hughes, people like Donald Reinhartson and Gene Kim, who I did an interview with yesterday. It's the standing on the shoulders of giants, and the more that we contribute, the more that we share. Embrace that sort of open source concept for ideas, not just for software in a GitHub repo. This is the sharing that we've got to do to make sure that everybody succeeds.
Absolutely, and very powerful, I think, as a way of progressing. So fantastic. Looking forward to the chat. Thanks again.
I'll see you in a week.